fill.
Cool. I was just told I was moderating this like probably within the last hour. So please show me some patience in this regard, but I think we'll try to have some fun here. All right, why don't we go down the line and start with intros. I actually don't know what everyone here thinks about this question. The title of this panel is like preconfs, lower latency, or both. I'd like to add a third way, neither. So please maybe state who you are and your position and why you think that in, I don't know, a minute or something.
Yeah, I'm Dankrad, now head of the protocol architecture team at the Ethereum Foundation. I think on this, my position is both, like everything is important. We need to get latencies down. We need to improve UX, and that pre-confirmations can do, but we also need to improve the economics and like make sure that the core, the essence of what Ethereum does remains as good as possible and remains close to the base layer. So we also need shorter slot times.
Hi, I'm Jonah. I guess for those of you who missed the introduction earlier, I'm a researcher and investor at a fund called Blockchain Capital. My position is that the North Star has to be lower in latency, not via pre-confirmations, as I said before, but true cutting of block times, cutting of finality times. The reason for this is I think it's the only solution that credibly will get Ethereum's network effects back.
All right, Alex from the ultrasound team, mostly known right now for being involved in the relay and also the ultrasound money, the meme, perhaps for people who still remember. My position, I'm sure will be involved at least for a fraction of the implementation that's needed for like either of the paths that are laid out here. I'm very undecided on what I think is a good idea here. It's also some of these timelines are pretty long and we tend to think pretty short. So I'd say I'm trying to have a very front row seat to actually what's going on, and I landed here. So yeah.
Okay, hi, I'm Lin. I'm from Nethermind, and I do protocol research around pre-confirmation, based rollups, and especially working with Tycho to bring pre-confirmation to based rollups. And my opinion here is that I think pre-confirmations are important, and I think pre-confirmations, because like you say increase like bandwidth and reduce latency, and there's a lot of efforts to do like the increased bandwidth part, and we have some ideas on how to do it, and like a lot of efforts on doing it, and we know how to do it in the L1 too, like because if you turn L1 into a whole rollup, then like you kind of get all the bandwidth benefits of the like rollup ecosystem. But we still haven't figured out how to reduce the latency part, and I think that's very important, because if you don't have reduced latency, are all these bandwidths even going to be used? Or people are going to be interested in them? And like having shorter block times, I think it had limits, like to how far you can get to. And there's some limitations where only pre-confirmations can get you to. And one interested avenue that I'm interested in right now is whether we can enshrine the concept of pre-confirmations into the L1 itself. So you can have like the concept of pre-confirmations, but enshrined in L1, the validators like ensure that these are actually emitted, and like, yeah, that's my opinion.
Amazing, thank you. So it sounds like we have both latency, decay, and preconfs. That's very cool. I'm curious about something you just said, Lin. So you just said that preconfs are faster than reducing block times. Do you want to talk more about that? And then maybe Jonah, do you want to reply to that, since these are the most extreme opinions I've heard so far?
So yeah, with reduced block times, like you're fundamentally limited by some bottlenecks, and one big one will be like the consensus, running the full consensus, aggregating all the signatures, and this will be a fundamental limitation as long as you are just reducing block times. And if you look at like other protocols like Solana, like they are already doing pre-confirmations. Like they are decoupling the proposer rotation from the block production. So like they have like 400 millisecond blocks, but then like one proposer have like four blocks in a row. And then each of the blocks, they also have shreds, what they call. So they have like enshrined concept of pre-confirmations in the L1 itself. And I think this is like the only way you can get under like, yeah, I don't know, like 2 seconds or something.
Ask you a question back. Let's pretend that you wake up tomorrow and there's pre-confirmations, or you wake up tomorrow and now block times are 6 seconds. What do you think will have a larger impact on the price of ETH?
So yeah, 6 seconds. Because I don't think 6 seconds is like.
I'm asking you, I'm not like the price of ETH tomorrow, 6-second block times, or do you have better pre-confirmations?
Yeah. So
Are they credible?
They're the current design.
So yeah, if it's completely like off protocol pre-confirmations, then I would actually prefer 6-second block times.
So then okay, so now let's try to say, will it be double as good, triple as good? Like, how much better do you think it'll be for the price of ETH?
To be honest, I'm not 100% sure because but as a user, I would say that I don't really get the hype around 100 millisecond or 50 millisecond pre-confirmations. I think that's too much. But 2 seconds or 1 second, I think that's UX wise where it really makes a difference. And 6 seconds, I'm not sure if it's. Yeah.
So what if we wake up tomorrow and it's 3 seconds? Do you think that would have a massive impact on the price of ETH?
Yeah, I mean, fast trial 1 is always good. If
so
you can get
stand to reason if the core thing Ethereum is selling is a secure hub, that doing the action that makes the price better and increases the security of the network, and also would create more network effects long term, is a more important solution.
Maybe let me pop this one also to the other panelists. So I'll start with Dankrad, or I see you're also nodding, Alex. Do you have a front run here? Ultrasound team coming in with the front run. Hell yeah.
Yeah, because I'm interested to explore a little bit more your position, because I think I lean a little bit more that I would feel the pre-confirmations are actually really, really interesting. And I'm still imagining more in my head this vision of there is just constant, very fast transactions happening, and everybody wants to do it on Ethereum. And yeah, from this reasoning, I would say that, yeah, actually, I think the price will be impacted more by now we have so many more transactions happening so much faster, and yeah, they're not quite settled yet, but I feel like many people wouldn't care, but I'm really interested how you would respond to that.
Well, I guess, who are pre-confirmations going to? So I think that if you think about who's the marginal or demand in pre-confirmations, it seems like there's probably two. There's the L2s, right? And then there's also giving them to, I guess, solvers for cross-chain stuff. Right? Those are the two places where you think there'll be demand in pre-confirmations, or are there other places?
Yeah, I have to stick with a don't know here. I'm not exploring
so
enough.
If it's
those two for sure.
If it's the L2s already give pre-confirmations. So it doesn't seem like it's, now the L2s giving you a pre-confirmation on their pre-conf, it seems like not such a big improvement. If the answer is solvers, well, if you believe trillions of dollars come on chain, if someone's make $100 million transfer.
I think there's another answer, which is the DeFi L1, right? For example, which is neither solvers nor L2s.
So you think that if we made pre-confirmations, you'd see a return of DeFi to the L1?
I'm not making a prediction. I do personally believe, but I'm a moderator here, so I'm trying to keep it out of it, that DeFi on the L1 is important. But wait, let me kick it to Dankrad at this point. What do you think from the EF perspective? Pre-confs, 3-second slots, what's more valuable? Do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, it's a super interesting question in the sense that, I disagree with several points that Lin brought up. The first thing is there's a fundamental difference between, I would say, enshrined pre-confirmations and someone else doing pre-confirmation. So we have to distinguish between these two. And I think enshrined pre-confirmation would actually also bring value to Ethereum, whereas non-enshrined ones is going to be a more complicated question. The second thing I disagree with is you said there's a fundamental limit to shorter slot times, and I don't think that's true. I think that's too much thinking in the protocol design we had 10 years ago, but actually now we know that that's not really true anymore, and we can design very different protocols. Yes, sure, it's going to be very, very hard work to get there, but there's no clear intrinsic limit to how short slot times can be in the protocol.
Round trip latency of the world, but that is if we get there, we're crushing it.
That is not even necessarily true, right? This still assumes that you have to confirm a previous block and to confirm the next, but that's not necessarily true. So yeah, I would be very careful with making this kind of claim.
So you think in the L1 block time you can get to 500 millisecond or under 1 second?
Definitely not in the designs that we currently have, but I think there's no inherent physical limit or anything like that here that says we can't go much below that. Yeah.
So then it stands to reason that if we want to really make Ethereum better and the right long-term solution, if there's really a theoretical way to get to sub half second, isn't that the best use of our energy as opposed to kind of doing 5% improvements on something that doesn't even give the full economic weight of the chain?
So I'm still not convinced that like having 500 millisecond block times is actually possible without while rotating the proposers and violating full consensus, but probably missing some of the design spaces here.
I think this is something we can actually explore as a community, right? I think you're postulating that these protocols may exist, Dankrad. I'm actually personally more on Lin's side here. I think there are physical limits, specifically in like the relativity of conflict resolution, but that's just my 2 cents. I think one of the interesting comments you made earlier, Jonah, was like, hey, there's no physical limits, we can engineer around it, but at least in my engineering degree, the whole thing was kind of about being constrained by physics, no? So how do you actually do that?
My point was that we assume where the laws of physics stand is just like incorrect. Like I don't think anyone here, I mean, unless there's someone in the room that would argue me on this one, that 12 seconds is the limit of what we can do. But we now are orchestrating pre-confirmations like, oh, the current protocol's stuck at 12 seconds, so we need to do these other weird things in order to get around it, all assuming that 12 seconds is the end of the road. That my argument is that we typically assume that the current design choice of Ethereum is the end of the road. My argument is the road is far longer than we think. So, and I think, by the way, as I said before, what happened with the gas limit is a great evidence of this. We just assumed, oh, the gas limit is X. Turns out it was way greater than X. And we just did not stress test it enough. Like I think you would have probably said years ago, well, you can't have infinite transactions being settled to Ethereum. Turns out you can via Validium. Maybe you don't get the data availability guarantee, but you can actually literally put infinite transactions into an O of 1 proof. Like there are incredible techniques out there that we can begin lowering block times, and we just assume 12 seconds is the end of the road, throw up our hands, and go with the easier solution of pre-confirmations because there's not the political will in this community in order to actually push engineering. Instead, we want to do interesting microeconomic game theory games.
And yeah, going back to Dankrad, I think your first point was that having this enshrining, having this off protocol as it's done right now, it's completely different. And I completely do agree, but at the same time, okay, we can wait until we have shorter block time, so a lot of these use cases. But I think that's a really wrong way of thinking about it. Let's wait until L1 improves, so we unlock these use cases. I think that's I think there's a lot of things that you can experiment in off-protocol ways, and I think the ideal case is that we experiment things in the off-protocol ways. You do L2 based pre-confirmation, for example, and it's all a concept of decoupling the proposer rotation, and you have one proposer have monopoly and pre-confirmation. We expose this design space, and we can kind of apply that back to the O1, whatever learning we have. As long as it's kind of isolated, and we can keep it detached from the O1, I think it's a really good experimentation ground, I would say.
Yeah, maybe to add to Steelman a little bit, the pre-conf position, that it's definitely not coming, at least I feel like from my perspective, it's not coming from the L1 just can't speed up anymore. It's just that, I don't know, the best I can do is maybe build another client that tries to do it faster, but I don't think that'll speed up the process. It might slow it down.
Right, but I mean, I think I think the problem here is you're talking about L2 pre-confirmations, and we have those, right? These have existed for years, and they have perfect UX and so on, and now we're introducing something new. Oh, now we want based, and then you build a complex system to do this for based. But for me, the big question is how do we get it for L1? And I don't see that coming quickly, in the next 1 or 2 years, at least from what I see at the moment. So I think actually it's likely that we will have shorter slot times before we have good L1 pre-confirmations.
And to layer onto that, I think there is a problem with pursuing both in parallel. I mean, we have 100 incredibly bright people in the room right now. And if you had to say how many panels over the last couple of days had to do with pre-confirmations versus how much had to do with making consensus faster, there's 0 about consensus and all about pre-confirmations. Every single conference you go to is pre-confirmations. There is very little mind space shared on this issue. So I do think there's trade-offs here, unfortunately. I think the problem is a political one. And to Dankrad's point, the L2s give you a pre-confirmation already. The UI is kind of there already. So we're basically making a 5% improvement. When We know there's a better improvement out there. It'll give you a bigger gain.
So yeah, I think like yeah, for L2 pre-confirmations and yes, like right now, like if you have a centralized sequencer, you already get pre-confirmations, and like that's enough. I mean, I see that point. But like the interesting thing about a base rollup trying to get pre-confirmations, it operates in an inherently like adversarial like environment. Like the proposers are like try to extract things, while so the users want good UX, but the proposer want to extract like revenue. And how do you incentivize, or how do you even have pre-confirmations in such a system? And that's like, you don't do that kind of exploration if you're just a centralized L2. Well, if you're based rollup pre-confirmations, you kind of have to think about all those things that you have to think about in the L1 too. So like a lot of the learning that we are having like in the base rollup pre-confirmation space, I would argue that it's very like applicable to whatever we have in L1 in the future. And that's what makes it so interesting from a research perspective.
So do you think the based rollups will be used? Do you think it will attract apps?
Okay, so I think it's like very, very theoretically super interesting, that's for sure, like base rollups. And I think it's super novel. And the bull case of base rollups is that it's the only shared sequencing layer that has any potential, I would say. Like nobody's gonna opt into another rollups like ecosystem, but like the base layer is something that people can opt into. It can be a shared layer for everything, shared blobs, shared aggregate, like proof aggregation, and shared like by having shared sequencing, you can have like good composability. And I think one is the only potential.
I guess I'm not asking a theoretical question. I'm saying practically, like we ship based rollups, are people going to use them? Like, it could be very interesting. There's a lot of very interesting problems out there, but like, will it be used?
Yeah, so I think, so if there's 100 base rollups, being a base rollup makes sense. Like you can share everything.
But isn't
can
that
we get
argument
there?
like saying, well, if there's a new Uber, like, there's a new Uber competitor that charges, that actually gives drivers 90% of the revenue. If they had a lot of drivers, then they'll get more drivers, of course. The problem is that there's already private interop solutions with network effects. They're saying, well, if base rollups work, we already have 100 of them, then getting the 100th and first one works. Like, it's not a great argument, right? Like, we already have enshrined interop networks that are private, that have good economics, that are going to win the marginal L2, and have huge bags to pay for them. As I said before, there's multi-million-dollar deals in order to get these L2s. So it doesn't stand to reason for me that if we ship based rollups, we're going to get that many interesting apps. It might be a cool research project, but it's not particularly practical. So indexing and spinning engineering wheels around a problem that's interesting in theory, but will not attract marginal users, feels like, again, a burning of resources.
Well, I guess one question I have for the panel to maybe pop the meta stack, and then you can reply to that also, is like, is that actually the goal? Like, are we encoding the goal here that like maximizing ETH price is all that matters, and like research, we can discount kind of finding the actual optimum solution because it may not achieve like the best price in the next 2 to 3 years. I'm curious, I'm not prescribing, I feel like this assumption is kind of encoded.
I think like at the very least there should be like, I don't know if ETH price is the right metric, but I think there's something like if nobody's using your protocol, then it's also kind of just useless to build it, right? Even if it's like super elegant and whatever. So I think there's something like, and for example, if Ethereum, the chain is completely like replaced by its pre-confirmation layer, then also it's like, well, why are we building it? So I think like there's something where like you have to at least like target that like important stuff happens on whatever you're building. Otherwise, like, what are you even building for?
Can I add to that? Sorry. Like, let's pretend the goal, and I actually agree with this, is to build a nation-state resistant economic hub, a credibly neutral platform for the world's economy to come, such that anybody around the world can come and use it permissionlessly, right? Let's say that's the goal. Well, the security of that hub, because we're in a proof-of-stake system, is intertwined with the ETH price. If the ETH price falls in half, the security falls in half, right? So the strength of that, fine, maybe not perfectly in half, but the security of the platform that you're using is fundamentally intertwined with the price. On top of that, there's tremendous reflexivity in the market, right? The benefit of having a hub is network effects. If the current design choices are shedding network effects and shedding users, then you're actually diminishing the hub. So in many ways, the ETH price is incredibly important to getting that actual end goal. It is an input. And on top of that, as Dankrad said, like, what's the point of building a product for nobody to use, right? Like, the other goal is, if we're building this hub, we want to make it a useful hub for people to actually use, not a theoretical hub that no one's using. Like, we actually want to solve real problems. The goal of ETH is to actually affect the real world, not to like be fun to think about.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess I'm asking this for a personal reason, because we talk a lot about like winning and beating the market, and there's a lot of pressure from Solana and from people who are kind of invested into big bags and speak very loudly about things. But like, I think there is a valid perspective, like you said, the niche economic system, like Linux versus Microsoft in like the 90s.
Linux is well used. It's so well used. Almost everything has Linux inside of it.
So
the Linux designers are like, let's make such interesting features that people can think about and not use. Well, increasingly less.
No one's saying. I don't think that's true. If you look at like the whole space of things, right?
Do you think base is?
I mean, you bring up Linux, but I mean, there was like. I remember the discussions when Linus Torvalds got involved and was like, well, we need to be sure that YouTube plays smoothly, right? Like he was very aware of like, you need to like have good UX and win the users as well to like be able to like impact the world.
Yes, but he wouldn't, like, let's say, take a closed source blob to accomplish that, right? Like if that was the, like, yes, it is important for YouTube to play smoothly, but what compromises, I guess, is the protocol willing to make for YouTube to play smoothly on ETH is kind of my meta question.
But again, this is like there's a baked-in assumption here that you can't achieve these outcomes. You can't lower latency without breaking the core promises of Ethereum. Like what you seem to be suggesting is that going lower than 12 seconds, somehow is it impossible to do without staying valuable.
I'm not saying anything. I never said the words 12 seconds. I think there's like a straw man here that like we can't do better than today, blah, blah, blah. But there are physical limits as you approach zero. I'm going to talk about that in my talk next. So if you're curious, stay tuned.
For sure. Okay, but we don't know what those limits are yet.
We have actually pretty good ideas in some, like we don't know, yes, 6 versus 12, fine. I acknowledge that there's optimization to be done, but we know like 50 milliseconds versus 12 seconds versus, let's say, the Bitcoin extremist position of like 10 minutes, right? Like it's not like we're totally blind. We have like kind of 10 plus years of data on these systems.
And we have modern systems that are running pretty damn fast and faster than Ethereum. It just feels like there's a lot of room for improvement.
Right, but they make different trade-offs.
Do you
right?
agree
Some of
we
those
can get to 6
systems do
seconds?
go down, for example.
Do you agree we can go to 6 seconds?
I don't know. I think probably we can go to 6 seconds. I think there are meaningful centralization trade-offs you have to make to get there. Are they worth it? It's up to the community, not me. Is my kind of perspective. Curious what the rest of the panelists think. Maybe Dankrad, let's start with you.
I think we're currently quite far from the Pareto space, so I think like there are like, I think there's more than 6 seconds we can do. And I think like below 6 seconds, I think maybe 4 seconds is kind of the limit I envisage for the current protocols. I do think there are things we can do, but like it does definitely need a much more major upgrade to the protocol, yeah.
Yeah, maybe a short comment on it. I do feel like we can go both directions and that choices are being made. And for example, I think of now for the relay, right? There's a time where we're trying to figure out what the block is going to be that's offered to the proposer. I feel like there's quite a bit of time there where there's really nothing happening. It's just people bidding against each other to figure out who's going to win. But it's not like there's a lot happening on a better block being constructed. And that is time you could squeeze. That is time where you could be doing more with the protocol to be producing more blocks or bigger blocks or whatever that is. But then we have to figure out which direction we want to go.
Lin? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely like we can get much lower than what we have right now. But from what I hear, it's like theoretically it's very simple. Like spec-wise, it's just like reducing the time. But like I hear that CL devs, they have a lot of considerations on making these kind of stuff and like a lot of testing, and someone has to actually champion this and really hoping it happens. But yeah, still I think it's gonna take a while to actually meaningfully lower the block times. And
Maybe that would be very interesting. If we can hear like rough estimates for getting to 6 seconds, how big of a project is that? Because if it's a very long project, then I feel like all these other ideas that people are coming up with are getting more and more relevant.
Maybe even before asking that question, we can ask, I mean, we moved from proof of work to proof of stake, which was an absolutely massive transition. In fact, there was people that sunk millions upon millions of dollars into mining infrastructure that were completely cut out, right? This was both politically hard, it was technically hard, and we did it. So maybe I'm curious what that experience was like and what it took to actually get the community behind it and how long it actually took.
Yes, I mean that definitely took a very long time, and I can't speak for the whole thing because I wasn't really like present even for the earliest days. But yeah, like it, I think it was a big project. I think the reality is that the Ethereum development has to become more efficient, in my opinion, to even like stay competitive in some ways. And we have to be better at getting things like this done. I think getting to 6 seconds is much smaller than this. It is definitely possible. I'm not the engineer on this. I have had some pushback from the engineers on this, but I would say from my current vantage point, it's a project that like is definitely like a several months big engineering effort, but it's not anything like the merge.
Want to check in. How are we doing on time? Okay, do we want any audience questions? This has been a spicy panel. Thank you all. So, any questions from the audience? Yes.
Yeah, so we have heterogeneous L2s. Vitalik speaks about risk V as a VM and now 6 seconds time to finality for blocks. Was Gav right all along?
Was Gav right?
Yeah, like that sounds like Polkadot, like dangerously close with all the features.
I'm not understanding the question, I'm sorry.
No, I just...
Like, are you saying like other blockchains had the idea of being faster? And
Yeah,
that's a
like
bad idea?
it is not that idea, but it is like, what's your take on general, like some sort of a cubification of blockchains which start to look like similar with all the features, including this?
The premise there is having similar features is bad, right? Like, why is being similarly fast a bad feature?
Well, the subtext is like, why Ethereum is not the first one to come up with those ideas, taking account all the momentum and...
Yeah, I mean, I think this is actually a large problem. I mean, I think for years, Ethereum defined itself relative to Bitcoin, right? So Ethereum was Bitcoin, but had smart contracts. So it was a world economic computer, right? That was the idea, right? We're not just a layer for digital gold, we can actually do contracts, right? And I think what you've seen in parallel, people started defining themselves relative to Ethereum and saying, well, we're going to have smart contracts, but be faster. And now it feels like Ethereum is very much caught between a rock and a hard place, where Bitcoin's clearly dominating on being digital gold, and you have other proof of stake networks, and I guess not necessarily proof of stake, but other networks dominating on being fast, right? So Ethereum's kind of caught between two worlds. I think, though, what is pretty clear about Ethereum is that the way it's judged is by usage, right? Whether that's because it increases its monetary premium or whether it's because it increases the productivity of the asset. And I think speed, importantly, is one of those things that make it more useful, right? So it feels like when you're caught between a rock and a hard place, this feels like the right direction to move, even if your feature's similar to other chains, right? Like being faster is the thing that gets you more usage.
And I would even say that like having similar features is a good thing, or like it means that we're all heading in the right direction. If everyone's like arriving at the same place, then it's good. Like for example, like, and I think Ethereum can learn a lot from other projects. Like for dataability sampling, we have Celestia, who's like going ahead and in like crazy bandwidth, and like for the latency, I think Solana, I think there are a lot of interesting things that we can learn from them, and I think that's a good thing. Like,
yeah, and maybe finally, the path we take to get there really matters. Like, it is good to adopt some of these early Bitcoin principles, and then that maybe makes you a lot slower to get to the speed part, but that could be, at least in my opinion, exactly the right way to get there, because you're showing that both are really important to you.
Dankrad, you want to close it out?
There's another question, I think.
Okay, one more question. Quick. Last one.
Thank you so much. It was very interesting. There's one thing, like when you talk about economic hub, to me, it kind of like is close to think about attracting new money. So like probably from traditional companies. And what I hear a lot from traditional companies that I talk to, from friends from the past, I mean, when they think about bringing some money somewhere to a bank or to place money somewhere, they want a counterparty that they can sue if something goes wrong. And if they don't have a counterparty, they want security. And to be honest, quite a couple of times I've heard them like being unsure about this whole builder situation. So like I was a bit surprised to not hear, like when you talk about the risks for the economic hub Ethereum, that you mentioned like the centralization tendencies among the builders, because for people that I know, for them it's a problem because they don't have someone to sue, but on the other hand, then they want at least basically the certainty that it's safe for them.
So I guess, I mean, it seems like the evidence out there is BlackRock tokenized a $500 million fund on chain, Apollo just tokenized a fund, KKR just tokenized a fund, you have hundreds of billions of dollars of stablecoin sitting on chain. If you look at RWAs, I mean, it's just up and to the right traction. The evidence is to the contrary, that there's actually increasing demand for putting assets on chain, right? So well, my argument is that is happening. It seems like financial actors are going to put assets on chain. I want Ethereum to be part of those flows. And for that to happen, it needs to compete on UX and compete on security. And right now, its security is being degraded as the price bleeds. And that's a function of less usage. And its UX is not competing on features. Look at Solana. We always thought that Solana was not going to be able to attract RWAs. Turns out they just want to deal with BlackRock put some RWAs on Solana. You have Apollo just made integration with Drift and put assets on Solana. Suddenly other chains are actually attracting marginal demand from institutions, right? So the situation is pretty dire. And I think as a result, we definitely need to be competing on UX and on speed and on security.
All right, I think that is all the time we have today. Maybe Dankrad, you haven't said anything in a while, and I would like to give the EF one closing thought on all this, and then we'll wrap up.
Well, I mean, I think it's been an interesting panel, but yeah, like I think what is clear is that I think most people at least agree that like we need to work hard on like improving, and I think like the good thing is like this is now gaining traction, and I believe like within the next 1 or 2 years we are gonna see a good reduction in the slot times.
That'd be sick.
All right, that was an intense panel. Let us give an extra special thank you for all of our panelists for duking it out and solving latency on Ethereum.
Woo! And big thanks to Phil for jumping in as a great moderator here.
Yeah, Phil, you did a great job.
Thanks.
All right.